The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim, the game of the year for 2011, in my opinion is one of the best games ever to be created, and is a worldwide phenomenon. But with every game comes that one person whose twisted mind decides to tweak the game a bit, creating a horrifying story. And with Bethesda Softworks' The Creation Kit download, as well as the renowned support of fan-made additions and creations, the game that popularized Arrow into Knee, the internet meme, would soon adopt an alternate world full of evil, darkness, and disturbing imagery. Now, give me a second as I tell you my story. Back in January 2012, I purchased Skyrim for the PC after hearing nothing but really positive reviews from everybody at my old high school. So, using about $60 worth in Walmart gift cards that I had saved over the past several years, I finally had the game in my hands at about 7 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon. Now, accompanied with my dad's promise that he wouldn't let my siblings or mother know that the game was rated M, I was actually able to play the game, as long as I promised that neither party watched me play it or see the game. My parents, especially my mother, despised M-rated games in our house. I quickly popped the shining disc into my laptop that I had gotten for the Christmas of 2011. After running through the usual installation issues with Steam's downloading, damn my slow internet connection, it really had a number on me. And after hours of ceaseless torment and anguish as my excitement reduced my patience to absolute zero, I was finally able to play the game. Now, let's get this out of the way. It was amazing. The graphics blew my mind, and the game quickly rose to my #1 favorite game of all time. Of course, I could see why everyone loved it so much. Anyway, after bringing in my Nord character named Dante up to level 5, I was researching the history of the Elder Scrolls series when I come up something at a Steam workshop. I was rendered speechless and dumbfounded by the vast library of amazing fan creations, the quests, the characters, weapons and armor, all that stuff. All of these amazingly creative people that have labored intensely for what could have been hours or days or even weeks to build. I fell upon a downloading spree, getting as many of these mods as I possibly could fit on my computer. After a long and rather treacherous road of downloading and installing these mods, I played my beloved game once again, eliminating the troublesome mods that either didn't work or totally fucked up my game, or were just plain worthless. Then one particular quest intrigued me, and the quest was entitled The Legend of the Blood Knight. I picked up a rare and hard-to-find book known as The Legend of the Blood Knight from one of the corpses from the one of the Blind Myr known as the Foul and the Dwemer Ruin known as Black Reach. Reading it through and through, the usual drumbeat sounded and a quest faded on the top of my screen called The Blood Knight's Retreat. Having downloaded and enjoyed the mod/quest mod and the Realms of the Daedra, I tossed aside this quest that is currently on, not that I was going to do it anyway, instead of going to the Third World to speak to Greybeards and Dovkin and whatever, blah, blah. And I allowed the Blood Knight's Retreat to become my active quest. I'd read the entry, the journal entry anyway, saying,
I read a book called The Legend of the Blood Knight, describing an old Nordic myth of an evil dragonborn that had murdered Emperor Locknir the Lionhearted before ascending to the throne, raining terror and death upon the folk of the empire before being tortured and skinned alive by Tiberius Septim I, who had been his second in command. The book mentioned a portal to a distant realm of oblivion, even avoided by the Daedric lords located deep within the Nordic crypt known as Devil's Claim, and that the Blood Knight will return when Alduin rises. I am to investigate the tomb and locate the portal.
My first quest objective was labeled Find the Haunted Island, and my arrow marker ended up pointing far into the Sea of Ghosts, almost beyond the game world. After hours of traveling, at this point I had no fast travel markers around there, and the nearest city was halfway across the map. I finally arrived at the shore of the sea, finding it full of corrupted shades and deaf Dragar overlords. I easily killed them, diving into the sea and swimming towards the distant marker. I noticed that all the music faded away and the only sound effects was the wind blowing at what sounded like a slow, high-pitched wailing. The more I swam, the more I could hear the sounds of twisted laughter echoing around me. This wasn't directional like most of the voices, it was all-encompassing, omnipresent, like the voice of Molag Bal or the other Daedric princes. Whispers emerged from the wind, echoing, and the game world darkened tremendously. to the point where it was night, even though the game's clock read shortly after that was morning. The whispers surrounded me, and I recognized them as those who played the abandoned house in Markarth. They were kind of like those, but a bit different. Just more odd. A thick fog descended over the game world as well, and in them I could see shadows, like people walking around before fading away. And then, after a few minutes, I could see faces. I mean actual faces. Faces of twisted in pain, terrified expressions in the water and in the fog. It was everywhere I looked. It was rather impressive for a mod. I was surrounded by these nightmarish entities, and the usual drum solo that signaled the beginning of a quest sounded again. The only message that faded in read, "You're being watched." The message was admittedly spooky, especially since the nightmare-inducing faces swirling around as some type of human curse. Curiosity busted in my judgment, and I continued on. As I swam towards the quest marker, the quest added drummed the sound again, and then a message appeared reading, "He sees you. He knows when you're coming." Suddenly, a hellish scream in terror, a male scream, appeared in the distance. At first, it was distant, but then it started speeding closer and closer until it was right upon me, and then in less than a second, a screaming man's face was white as snow, twisted and morbid, sped right in front of me at an impossible speed, degenerating away into the fog, inches before my face. This scared the living crap out of me as I instantly returned to my desktop, turning off the speakers. I didn't want to have the speakers on as they were built into my laptop. As soon as I returned to the game, a new message appeared. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." I continued on in silence, and then the message appeared again. "You need sound to finish this mission." I was struck speechless, and then suddenly my sound returned, loud and booming. I returned to the desktop, fading the sound down, and, well, realizing a big crack to the max, I decided to try muting the bar this time, returning to the game. Then the sound came on again. Again, I turned down the volume bar to low, but then immediately jumped back to the max. Alarmed, I shut down the game, restarting my computer. As I restarted Skyrim, making sure the sound was off. As soon as I loaded the autosave point, coincidentally right after the "I wouldn't do that if I were you" message appeared, the sound returned again, and then I finally gave up, needing to complete the mission. To, well, satisfy my curiosity. I mean, like, this mod was cool. Freaky, but cool. The suspicion of disbelief returning, I continued on with the mission. After several more minutes, I saw a dark silhouette emerge from the fog. Thunder rumbled, and a faint snow began to fall upon touching the shore of the island. Completely barren, looking as if something more suiting for Fallout 3 landscape than more of a Skyrim one. The quest updated, and a message appeared on the screen saying, "Haunted Isle discovered." Checking my quest objectives, it read, "Completed. Found the haunted island." Then, quest added. Locate the Devil's Cairn. And a new direction appeared, a new map marker appeared, pointing at the heart of the island. The music on the whole island was the usual Nordic dungeon theme, on the official soundtrack entitled Silent Footsteps. The island itself was like a hill, peaking at the dead center of the island, and it was almost completely dead. Hell, even the trees were skeletal, appearing charred and broken. Flames here and there burnt in little pockets, and the island was infested with shades, skeletons, and high-level Dragar, making it a bitch to reach the crypt. But once I finally arrived at the peak, I heard the call of a dragon, and the flapping of wings. The dragon battle music began, and I looked up, bow and arrow out, ready to fight. To my surprise, I see a skeletal dragon land right beside me, chattering in Alduin's voice. As soon as my crosshairs landed on the dragon, his name appeared to be Corruptus. A new message appeared on the top of the screen saying, "This beast once ruled alongside his master before he was slain, and his body thrown into the deepest pits of oblivion." Another thing I noted was that the sky was slowly growing from night to the swirling clouds of Sovngarde. I began to attack the dragon, who went down with relative ease compared to the other creatures on the island, and once he was slain, there was no burning animation, no absorption of the dragon soul. Instead, a message appeared reading, "He now rests alongside Talos." With the dragon now dead, I reached the entrance of the tomb, but it wasn't as elaborate as the other dungeons. No, it was more than just boarded up on... It was weird. I entered a crypt, waiting through the loading screens, and I was disturbed to see the loading screen showed a single picture of a man. A man in a daged cuirass, but every other part of his armor was missing, and the man appeared to be almost skinned. He was lying in the throne position as if he died there before. His hands and legs were tied down with ropes to the arms and legs of the throne. There was no blood, but the slick pink muscle beneath the skin was clearly visible, covering his body as it reflected light as if it was wet with water or something. The accompanying message was, "This will happen to you, Alex." And then that message gave way to, "You will die on the 18th evening star, 4E201. Sleep? And he'll come for you." It was alarming to see that the game knew my name, but I figured the mod was just simply pulling information from my user account, and I knew some games actually did do that. Finally, the dungeon message appeared before me, ending the cryptic messages and my objectives, and then my objectives updated again. Completed. Located Devers Cairn. Objective added. Discover the portal. The dungeon music was the same. Detailing was the same, but the bad guys were dragon priests and shades. The dungeon was a lot more linear than most, and in fact, it was just one long, huge hallway. Usually, dungeons were long and consistently taking turns and curves, perhaps to create the illusion that it was, well, larger than it in actual fact was. Finally, I reached a staircase that descended deeper into the dungeon, but it didn't seem to end. For 5 consecutive minutes, I ran down the stairs, no bottom in sight. And I wondered if I was caught in some weird infinite loop created by a glitch or the author's personal intention. I finally reached the end, and it was very dark. The lighting was bloody red as if I was in a photographer's dark room. I could hear the growls of Dragar, and I actually managed to kill them in the limited sight. Bones littered the floor, and it was all over the place, as did skeletons, Dragar, and bandits. All were dead, but the corpses were labeled grisly remains. The corridors of the floor were lined on either side with rows upon rows of destroyed coffins. And once I reached the end of another ridiculously long straight hallway, I reached a massive circular room. Walls and coffins lined the perimeter walls, stretching almost 3 stories high. And the ceiling was some kind of vine-covered dome. The large room was open with a raised platform in the dead center, 3 steps up from the ground level. On the raised platform was a single ornate coffin, like the funeral pyre of Codlac Whitemane at the end of the companion's quest line. I walked up to the coffin, and then a prompt came up to say, "Press E to activate the Shrine of the Blood Knight." I did, and then the coffin exploded, revealing a portal like the one used at the end of the Singuin Daedra quest. The room was filled with sounds of exploding coffins. I looked around, and I was surrounded on all sides by dragon priests. I turned back to the portal, and it read, "Press E to activate the Blood Knight's retreat." And I did. I was teleported away, going through another load screen with a horrific corpse, those cryptic messages again. When the level loaded, I was once more greeted by the sound of those strange moans, whispers, and the sound, like the sounds I was getting at to see a ghost. And now, thunder cracked loudly, flashing lightning all around me. Above the sky was like Sovereign Guards again, but it was painted dark, like a silky green. The plan before me was completely barren, with dried, baked earth on the entire landscape with a coal black color. Completed. Discovered a portal. Quest objective added. Slay the Blood Knight. I wandered the large empty landscape, crawling with shades and Demora. The baked desert before me was wide and lined on either side with impossibly high mountains, and I was forced to follow the direction it took me. That's when the quest added drums played, and then the message appeared on the screen. "Death is upon you." And then I heard the sound of a horse whining behind me, and when I turned, I saw the spirit of the Headless Horseman, now entirely black and morbid looking, and it growled in the voice of a dragon priestess chasing after me. I mean, I ran like hell. I could hear it coming closer and closer, and as it got close, the screams and moans around me became crystal clear, coming closer to me, as if, like, the moans were not coming from my speakers, but as if there's, like, some hole in my wall it would just screaming through. The fog returned, and as did the faces. My screen flashed white, and it took the appearance as if I used the unrelenting force shout, but the shockwave had frozen around my screen. My screen began to grow rather blurry as the horseman became closer and closer to me. I narrowly arrived at a large central area, the headless horseman passing through me and fading away, and then the voices silenced. Even the wind stopped. I heard a thud, like approaching footsteps from a massive giant. There was a demonic shrill shriek, as omnipresent as everything else, and I twisted my character around and my own eyes widened as I saw something walk unsteadily towards me. Like a zombie, it was silhouetted at first, and my character wouldn't move. The arrow keys wouldn't respond. Nothing would. I couldn't swing or slash. I couldn't look. Then the voices returned again, deafening in intensity, as I watched the creature stumble towards me, lightning flashes revealing a clean, pink flesh. It stopped right in front of me. Still too dark to make out any details, and I breathed heavily. Suddenly, its head shot up and its face getting right in front of mine, and a dominating my screen. And it roared at me. Its face is terrifying, eyes yellow orbs, flesh wet looking pink, and veins and arteries outlined in cruel detail. It was bald-headed and parts of muscle of the dome of its head pulled back, revealing clean white bone. Its scream was very animal-like, not even human. A deep voice, but barely audible, sounded just beneath the whimpering and rumbling on it. And it was what I assumed to be Draconic. The music, which had become what of Skyrim's official soundtrack entitled Blood and Steel, suddenly skipped as if the disc was skipping. However, that would have been impossible because there is no disc. I had this on Steam. And it kept up as I regained control, immediately thrown backwards, just like the opening scene where Alduin blasted you away from the chopping block. Everything, even the voices were skipping now, and the creature had lunged at me, running at an impossible speed, impossible to run away from. As it ran, its arms and head flopped around. Just like in the loading screen, he wore only a Daedric cuirass. Everything else was missing. And he growled, and he roared as he charged at me. I barely had enough time to draw my sword before it pounced me, knocking me to the ground as it sat on top of me, rolling at my face. As his head snapped back at the bottom, I assumed that he was trying to break my neck. A message appeared on the screen stating, "Press the left click to free yourself." I did, and then the Blood Knight was thrown back. Sword drawn, I slashed at him, striking a critical swipe with my first attack. His health bar barely depleted. And then he casted a spell, Summon Dragon Priest. Occupied with the Dragon Priest, he pounced on me again. I pressed the left click button again, and he was thrown off, and I targeted him, ignoring the Dragon Priest altogether. Once his health bar was drawn to a quarter, he stumbled backwards, bending over as the game world shook. And corrupted shades, a lot of them appeared on the edges of the circular area, charging at me. The activate text that helped me throw the damn creature off me reappeared, saying, "Press space plus E plus left click to finish him." I did, and my character leaped off the ground, lunging and diving the blade at the exhausted Blood Knight, and he immediately roared at me again. My sword went right through its mouth and out the back of his skull. The animation pulled the sword from his throat, swiping it with a roar from my player, as the sword decapitated the Lich. As soon as I killed the creature, the corrupted sage collapsed to death as well, and everything grew silent, and still absolutely no sound, no music, nothing but total silence. The world shook, and a loud rumble sounded as if something was collapsing in a hellish, stretchy, almost metallic, and a tiny man's voice yelled, an omnipresent echoing, "No!" As the world I was in shook harder and harder, and while light briefly flashed on the screen before fading in. The light faded away, and I found myself back on the haunted isle, and now the dungeon had collapsed as well as the entrance had sunken in. And now, it was just a pile of rubble and debris. The island was bright and sunny and calm again, with the scene Skyrim atmosphere track playing. The barren world was now full of glass and healthy trees. The statue of Akatosh was in the center of the island now, and the dragon's corpse vanished, but whether it was because of the mission or because there were too many character models on screen, I do not know. The drum sounded again, and a message at the top screen saying, "The curse has been lifted, the Blood Knight has been freed, but one must take his place in oblivion." And that was followed by the quest complete, Blood Knight's Retreat. I explored the island for a little bit, finding a hidden just beneath lake in the center of the island. A treasure chest with a key lock required, even though I don't think the key was required to unlock the chest. It unlocked anyway, yielding a lot of gold, some jewels, and some enchanted Daedric armor, as well as swords labeled the Armory of the Blood Knight and the Blood Knight Saber. I searched my inventory for the key, finding an ugly, flesh-looking pink key inside of it. It looked like it was as if it was made of the same muscle that the Blood Knight was, labeled the Cursed Key, which I couldn't get rid of it because it was, well, quest locked. The game played along just as normal until the mouth of Evening Star. I'm not much for sleeping, so it was well into next year before I finally decided to get the Lover's Comfort bonus from my Argonian wife, Chevy. As I did, the screen remained black. After the countdown ended, the Silence Footsteps dungeon music began playing, and then the game suddenly loaded, and I found myself in a more strange world. In the same arena as I had slayed the Blood Knight, the only sound was playing was the dungeon music, and a whoosh, large roaring and a burning fire beneath that. I once more couldn't move, but I could at least look around. I stayed in the same place for several minutes, wondering if the game had frozen or glitched. I was about to turn it off when a rich black fog began to move in. Suddenly overtaking the land, slowly overtaking the land, rendering visibility 0. Within minutes, I was completely encroached with the black smoke, and whispers and voices returned. Smoke, more brick in front of me, and the silhouette of a man, hunched over, slowly came into view in front of me. It was a shade version of the Blood Knight, roaring in my face. His head was still nightmarish looking. He looked like a zombie, and his open mouth grew closer and closer to my screen before it was completely covered, and his disgusting liquid crunch of something just sounded in my headphones. Then the screen flickered briefly before it completely went dark, sending me to the desktop. I reloaded the game, trying to access my save states, but all of them had been grayed out, and the ones that had been highlighted had the information Dante Nord dead, level 5. The screenshot accompanying the save showed a black screen, the center of it with a bald-headed man with skin flush red as viewed in a photographer's darkroom. His head was kneeling for me. The skin was stretched fully over his bones, as I could see only blackness in his eyes. They were sunken into a skull-like face, lost in a shadow. I could make out clean white fangs lining the mouth in a macabre smile. Crudely carved into his forehead was a pentagram surrounded by a circle. As soon as I viewed the image, the game froze, crashed, sending me back to desktop. I tried to open the game again, but I got to the main menu before crashing again. It did this 4 times, and I was forced to delete and reinstall the game. As soon as I did, I unsubscribed from the mod and immediately deleted it from my list. Never wanted to fall upon that again. The game worked again afterwards, but it completely cleaned out all my save states, forcing me to reinstall the game and restart the game and achievements. I refused to play that mod again, and I tried looking for it about a couple of months later, but I don't see it on there anymore. I'm not gonna lie, the game did disturb me. And to this day, I still play Skyrim, of course, because that is still my favorite game, but I refuse to look at mods that haven't been previously reviewed. Thank you. This is Sir Eris Lionheart, signing off.